The envelope didn't have a return address. That was the first red flag. The second, my full name written in Clara's handwriting, the same looping cursive she'd used to sign every birthday card when we were kids, back when we still pretended we were on the same team. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen counter next to the cold coffee and unopened bills. Something about it felt calculated, like Clara knew the silence between us made her words more powerful now. When I finally slit the envelope open with a butter knife, I didn't sit down. I stood, like I was bracing for a blow. Meredith, I don't know how to start this except to say, I need you. I'm sick, and not in the poetic wine and blanket kind of way. Stage 4, real, no makeup, end of the line kind of sick. I don't know what else to do, but tell the truth. Please come. There's more to this than just an apology. I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm asking for it anyway. Clara, before we continue, if you're already drawn in by this story, if you've ever experienced complicated family dynamics, long-held secrets, or the slow burn of reclaiming your worth, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. This space is for stories that don't just entertain. They heal, empower, and resonate. Your engagement helps this community grow. Now, let's keep going. Clara's letter was brief, almost surgical in its guilt. That was her way. She knew when to use brevity like a scalpel, and I, ever the loyal older sister, still felt that sting. It had been almost 8 years since we last spoke. 8 years since she married Owen. 8 years since I left the wedding halfway through the reception. 8 years since she said to me, without irony, "You always act like everything's owed to you, Meredith." Maybe this time it's not. She'd said it while wearing my dress. The one Mom bought for me before she passed. The one Clara knew I had tucked in the back of my closet for something special. She took it without asking, tailored it to fit her smaller frame, and wore it down the aisle like it had always been hers. That moment broke something in me that I haven't tried to fix. Until now. I read the letter twice, then a third time, and still the only words that echoed were, "I need you." Clara had never needed anyone. Not really. She was the kind of person who could burn bridges and have another one built before the ashes cooled. People liked her. They forgave her. I wasn't people. I was the one she took from. Owen, the house, the attention, the forgiveness, the benefit of the doubt. She collected my milestones like souvenirs from a trip she never earned. And now she wanted what? Closure? I poured myself another cup of coffee and stared out the window. The view hadn't changed in 5 years. Same empty bird feeder. Same neighbor who refused to trim his hedges. Same air of waiting for something that never comes. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is sharp. It burns out. I was something colder, heavier, resolved. But curiosity, that still flickered like an old porch light, I never got around to replacing. I picked up the envelope again and noticed a second slip of paper tucked behind the letter. A photo, grainy, from a hospital. Clara was thinner, paler, cheeks sunken. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf. And still, somehow, she smirked at the camera like she was posing for a tabloid interview. At the bottom, a scribbled note. "I'll understand if you don't come, but I'll always wonder if you ever forgave me." Forgiveness. It's such a strange word. It sounds clean, final, like an eraser that works on blood. But what no one tells you is this. Forgiveness doesn't mean you let them back in. It means you stop letting them live in your head rent-free. I didn't answer the letter that day. I didn't burn it either. I just placed it in the drawer where I keep the things I can't yet name. My wedding ring, a key to my childhood home. And now, Clara's goodbye. It was a 4-hour drive from my apartment to Clara's town, but I stretched it to 6. I stopped for gas I didn't need, bought snacks I didn't eat, and played music I didn't hear. Every mile forward was an inch deeper into a wound I'd spent nearly a decade avoiding. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not my coworker Lisa, who assumed I was finally taking time off to do something for myself, not my ex-husband's mother, who still sent me Christmas cards out of guilt. Certainly not Owen. The last time I saw him, his eyes couldn't meet mine. The last time he said my name, it was at his wedding, not to me, and the last thing I said to him was whispered through clenched teeth. You'll never get the best of me again. But Clara had, not because she was better, because she moved like consequences didn't apply. Clara had moved into their dream house 3 years ago, a craftsman bungalow tucked behind a line of dogwoods and an oversized porch swing like something from a catalog ad titled Warm Welcome, Stable Marriage, Happy Ending. I parked across the street, stared at it. The house was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just bigger now, emotionally. Anyway, back then, I would have walked up that path trying to shrink myself to avoid taking up too much space. Now, I walked slowly, proudly. Every step said, you should have let me leave you behind. The door opened before I knocked. Not Owen, a nurse, or maybe a hospice aide. She wore scrubs with little lavender flowers and had the kind of smile you only learn after watching people die. You must be Meredith, she said gently. She's been asking all morning. How lucid is she? More than you'd expect. Less than she wants you to believe. Inside, the house smelled like lemon disinfectant and faint vanilla candles, the kind people light to cover up the scent of illness. A large recliner sat near the window, facing the garden, and there was Clara, diminished, fragile. Her frame was draped in a soft green blanket, her scarf replaced with a knit beanie. She looked up as I entered. You came. Don't sound so surprised. She smiled weakly. I am surprised, but not ungrateful. There was silence, the kind that stretches and hums in your bones. You look like Mom, she said, and you look like someone who has something to say. Still sharp, still tired of being the cleanup crew. She nodded, not even pretending to deflect. I'm dying. I read the letter. I didn't lie this time. Congratulations. She laughed, and it turned into a cough. Her nurse reappeared, offered water, then disappeared like she'd done this exact routine 100 times before. I didn't ask you here to cry or confess or beg. Clara said once we were alone. I asked because I didn't want to die with you thinking I never loved you. I stared at her. You stole the man I loved. You wore our dead mother's dress on your wedding day. You lied about your miscarriage to keep him from leaving. She flinched. You think love erases all that? No, she whispered, but I think love is the reason I can't stop thinking about it. That was the moment something cracked. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but a sliver of understanding. She wasn't looking for redemption. She was looking for someone to see her on the way out. And maybe I could do that just once. I didn't come for you, I said, walking to the window. Then why? I came for me. Because I didn't want your memory to be the last thing I ran from. She blinked hard. Then stay a little. A little. We spent the next 2 hours talking about nothing. TV shows. The garden. That time I broke my wrist trying to follow her down the ravine near our grandmother's house. It was strange. Familiar. Exhausting. But also healing in the smallest, rawest way. When I stood to leave, she reached for something. A box, wrapped in newspaper, tied with twine. This is for you. I hesitated. It's not a bribe, she said. It's a map. Inside the box, a faded journal, hers from before the wedding. A photo of me and Owen at a college party. A sealed envelope labeled, "Read after I'm gone." I didn't ask questions. She didn't push. We both knew some answers have to be earned, not given. As I walked to the door, she called out one last time. Meredith. Yeah. You were always better than me. I just couldn't live in your shadow. So I set it on fire. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream or crumble or shake. I drove home with the windows down and the wind in my ears like the road was slowly scraping something off me. Bitterness, maybe, or grief I hadn't been allowed to process. I didn't know what was in the final letter. I didn't know what the journal would reveal. But for the first time in years, I didn't dread knowing. I waited 3 days before opening the journal. It sat on my kitchen table, unopened, next to the sealed envelope Clara had marked, "Read after I'm gone." I hadn't called the hospice nurse. I hadn't Googled obituaries. I didn't want the finality yet. I just wanted the space between knowing and knowing for sure to stretch a little longer. There's something ceremonial about opening someone's journal. It's like breaking into a version of them that only ever whispered. When I finally turned to the first page, the ink bled slightly at the edges. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Loopy, confident, sharp on the lowercase t's. Even in private, Clara wrote like she had an audience. August 19th. Meredith is coming home for Mom's birthday next week. I'm already bracing. She'll bring her perfect little resume and her sharp comments and that invisible wall she builds between us. I don't know how we turned into strangers, but I know part of it is me. That entry hit harder than I expected. It was from 8 years ago, just before Mom died. I didn't remember it like that. I remembered Clara brushing past me in the hallway, refusing to help plan the party, laughing too loudly at the wine glass she knocked over. But this was self-awareness. September 3rd. Mom's gone. The house feels like it's holding its breath without her. Meredith cried alone in the garage. I watched her through the window and didn't go to her. I don't know why. Maybe because she was the one Mom always believed. The one who didn't get caught lying about the car or skipping school or stealing money from her purse. I've always been the fire. She's always been the water. But somehow, I'm the one who keeps burning down the room. That metaphor lodged itself in my chest. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first real insight I'd seen into the person Clara thought she was. Not the golden child, not the careless beauty, but someone broken in a different way, someone who believed she had to destroy things to feel in control. I read the rest slowly, like I was winding through a story that finally explained its villain. In the entries leading up to her wedding, Clara wrote about Owen and about me. February 12th. Meredith doesn't know I kissed him. It was after the funeral. One of those grief blurs. You know, he was drunk. I was cruel. I told myself it didn't matter. But then he kept calling, and I kept answering. She never even noticed. I did notice. I just didn't want to see it. Not then. March 1st, he said he was falling in love with me. I laughed. Then I cried. I asked him if it felt like betrayal. He said Meredith never really let him in, that she was always planning something else, somewhere else, someone else. I wanted to believe that. So I did. There it was. The justification. The lie she wrapped around herself like a blanket, warm and dangerous. I remembered what it felt like when Owen pulled away from me during that time. I blamed grief. I blamed work. I blamed myself. But never them. I turned a few more pages. Most of the entries were about the wedding. The dress, the flowers, the lie she told about being pregnant to keep Owen from hesitating. Then, finally, one last entry. April 28th, 5 days after the wedding. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I don't recognize. Meredith didn't come to the reception. Mom's dress fit me, but it didn't feel like mine. I keep expecting the high to come. That I won moment, but all I feel is hollow. Maybe this is what it means to take something that wasn't meant for you. It never fits right. I wish I could ask her to hate me to my face. I think I deserve that. I stared at the page for a long time. There was no final period, no signature, just a trail of ink like the pen ran out mid-thought, or like she wasn't done when she stopped writing. I closed the journal, not gently, not violently, just with finality, like ending a chapter that never should have been written in the first place. Later that night, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting again, but shakier this time, uneven and rushed. Meredith, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. Or close. I won't ask you for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I will ask you this. Don't let me take any more from you. Not your anger. Not your story. Not your peace. Tell it. Out loud. As often as you need. And don't feel guilty if people hate me for it. That was my legacy to choose. Yours is different. It always was. Clara. I folded the letter and slid it into the back of the journal. This time, not to bury it, but to keep it close. Not because I wanted to hold her version of the truth, but because mine needed a full view of the battlefield. That night, I sat on my porch with a pen and a blank notebook, and for the first time in a very long time, I started writing my version of everything, not to publish, not to post, just to remember who I'd been before the silence settled. It was raining when he showed up, not dramatically, not the thunder and lightning kind of storm that movies use to announce a moment, just a steady, gray drizzle that softened the edges of everything and made the world feel a little blurred, like a memory you're not sure you want back. Owen. I hadn't seen him in almost 5 years. Not since the fundraiser at the hospital where we accidentally stood too close at the coffee table. And he muttered, "You look well," like I was an acquaintance, not a woman he'd once held like a promise. When I opened the door, I didn't say anything, just stared. He looked older, not in a sad way, just worn in like a favorite shirt that had seen too many wash cycles. There were streaks of silver in his beard now, and his jacket was soaked at the shoulders. "You're a hard woman to find," he said, finally. Not hard, just uninterested in being found. He gave a dry laugh and looked past me toward the hallway, as if memories could walk out and greet him. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away, but I stepped aside. Not for him. For closure. We sat across from each other in the living room. No drinks. No small talk. The silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. He stared at the journal still sitting on my table. Clara's. I didn't move it. If it made him uncomfortable, he'd have to sit in it. "She's gone," he said. "I know." He nodded slowly. "She asked me to give you something. I guess she figured I owed you the delivery." I raised an eyebrow. "You think that's the only thing you owed me?" He didn't flinch, but he didn't answer either. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. This one had no handwriting, just a name typed in simple black font. Meredith Harper. I didn't open it. Not yet. "Why are you really here, Owen?" "Because I read the journal. She asked me to. And I realized I never really saw you clearly." I leaned back, folding my arms. "You saw enough to sleep next to me and tell me you loved me. You saw enough to turn toward her and pretend it was fate instead of betrayal." He didn't deny it. "I was weak. You were selfish." He nodded again. "That too." For a moment, I wanted to rage, to yell, to throw something, to say all the things I never said when he stood at the altar with her instead of me. But instead, I said the one thing I hadn't expected to. "I'm not angry anymore." He looked at me like I'd spoken a different language. You're not. No, I've just finally realized I've been sitting in grief disguised as anger. Grief, not for you, or even for her. For me. The me I abandoned trying to protect people who never picked me. He looked down. The rain was still steady outside, making the windows hum softly. She talked about you, more in the last 2 weeks than in the whole time we were married. Did it ever bother you that she was still obsessed with me? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Only when I realized she measured herself against you. Even in love, even in war, it was always you she was fighting. I took a deep breath. That's the thing about people like Clara. They don't want to win. They just don't want you to win. He nodded slowly. She said you'd never come. I told her she was probably right. But when the nurse said you'd been there, he paused. Thank you for giving her that. Even if she didn't deserve it, I didn't do it for her. We sat there for another minute. Then I finally opened the envelope. Inside, one photo and a short note. The photo was from our college graduation. Me, Clara, and Owen, all smiles, but I could see it now. The beginning of the cracks. The way Clara clung to him, just a little too tightly. The way I stood slightly apart. The note, in Clara's final scrawl. This is the last photo before everything changed. I thought you should have it. The version of us that could have been real. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to love without competition. You never needed to win. You already were enough. See, I folded the note and set it aside. You can go now, I said. Owen stood, hesitated. Do you hate me? I looked up at him. No, I just don't believe you deserve a place in my future. He opened the door. The rain had lightened, and he left without another word. That night, I didn't think about what could have been. I didn't mourn a life that never came true. I sat with the version of myself who survived all of it and still knew how to be whole. Grief is strange. It doesn't show up like a flood the way people say. It trickles in like water beneath a door, silent and persistent. You don't notice it at first. And then suddenly the floor's soaked and you're standing in the middle of your life wondering how it got so heavy. For the first time in years, I had no one left to blame. Clara was gone. Owen was gone. Even Mom, whose ghost still lived in my expectations, she had faded into something softer, more bearable. That left only me. And the question, what now? I took a week off work. Lisa didn't ask why. She just handed me a sticky note with a cartoon dog holding a margarita and said, "Unplug, or I'm hiding your laptop." The silence in my apartment became something else entirely when I stopped filling it with distraction. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I stopped opening my email just in case. Instead, I walked every morning for hours, not for exercise. Not for some Pinterest wellness routine, just to listen to myself think. And every step reminded me of something I hadn't said in years. This life is still mine. I started making a list, not a bucket list, not a 5-year plan. What if list? Simple, honest things that used to belong to me before I gave them up for people who expected me to play support character in my own story. What if I learned to paint again? What if I moved to a new city? What if I stopped apologizing for making people uncomfortable? What if I said yes to a date without overthinking it? What if I forgave myself for staying so long in someone else's idea of who I should be? It felt ridiculous at first, but it was also the first time I felt truly in motion. One afternoon, I pulled out an old canvas from the closet. It was covered in dust, still wrapped in brown paper from when I left my art program at 23 to take care of Mom. Back then, Clara told everyone I left because I lost interest. But the truth was, I left because no one else would step up. Because I was the one who always filled in the cracks, like grout. Necessary, Invisible. I unwrapped the canvas, started painting, not with purpose, not with precision, just with breath, blues, grays, soft earth tones. It didn't look like anything yet, but it looked like freedom. That evening, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Julia. We met during my brief teaching stint after college. She was bold, witty, and gentle in the ways I wasn't brave enough to be. We'd been friends until the year of the wedding, when she asked why I was letting Clara get away with everything, and I chose to cut her off instead of facing the truth. The phone rang once, twice. Meredith. Hey, I said, I was wondering if you'd want to have coffee sometime. Silence. Then, you're buying, and I'm hugging you whether you like it or not. We met the next morning at the bookstore cafe. I almost cried when I saw her, not because I was sad, but because her face didn't carry the burden of shared betrayal. It carried remembrance and safety. You look like you've just climbed out of a 10-year coma, she said. I think I have. We talked for 2 hours. About everything. About Clara. About Owen. About how silence can shape a person more than words ever could. And then she said something that stayed with me. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness, but you do owe yourself a life that isn't defined by what they took. I went home and stared at my wall. It was blank. Literally. Years of not knowing what to hang. Not wanting to choose. Waiting for something or someone to validate the space. So I went to the closet, pulled out the painting I had started, and hung it. It was unfinished, but it was mine. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened my journal, not Clara's, mine. And I wrote something I hadn't dared put into words. I spent so long being the dependable one, the quiet one, the fixer. I forgot that survival isn't a personality. It's just a place you build from. And now, I'm building. Days passed. I started painting daily. Not well, not expertly, but honestly. I met with Julia again, and again. Then once with her wife, who told me I had sad eyes with very strong main character potential. For the first time in forever, I laughed until my stomach hurt. I started looking at other cities, smaller ones, creative ones. I applied to an artist's residency program. Just one, just to see. 2 weeks later, an email came in. Dear Meredith Harper, we are thrilled to offer you a place in our spring creative residency. I reread it 3 times, then whispered, this is mine. Before I left for the residency, I visited Clara's grave. I hadn't gone to the funeral. I didn't want to perform grief for an audience that had only ever watched me lose. But I went alone, quietly, just me and the wind. No flowers, no dramatics, just words. You were wrong, I said aloud. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop letting you make me feel like I was losing. As I walked away, I felt lighter. Not free, not completely, but untethered, like finally setting something down after carrying it too far, for too long. The artist residency was nestled in the hills of a quiet town 2 states away, a place with more pine trees than people, and a sky so wide it made you feel like possibility wasn't a metaphor, but a physical thing. The building was a converted library. Now, a mix of lofted studios, creaky wooden floors, and sunlit corners where silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. I arrived on a Sunday. It smelled like old books, linseed oil, and rain. My room was small. 1 bed, 1 desk, a giant window that let in morning light like a blessing. And for the first time in over a decade, I walked into a space where no one knew Clara. No one knew Owen. No one knew what I had given up or what I had clawed back. They just saw me. Meredith, artist, midlife beginner, unfinished and unapologetic. The first few days were quiet, not lonely, just introspective. I met the others slowly. A potter named Evie, who only spoke in whispers. An older man named Tom, who painted with a cigarette in his mouth and classical music in his ears. A younger girl named Nor, barely 22, who made sculptures out of thrift store junk and said things like, "I don't believe in art that doesn't bleed." They didn't ask questions. They didn't need explanations. They let the work speak first. So I started painting. I filled canvas after canvas. At first, they were abstract, color and texture more than image. Then slowly, things emerged. A hallway, a woman in a mirror, a house burning in the distance with no smoke, a girl holding a paintbrush like it was a sword. It wasn't subtle, but it was true. And when Evie wandered past my studio one morning and said, "That one looks like it forgave itself," I almost cried. But healing, I've learned, isn't linear. One evening, after a particularly rough critique session, not unkind, just honest, I went back to my room, poured a glass of red wine, and opened my laptop. Without thinking, I searched Clara's name. The obituaries were quiet, tasteful, a paragraph in a local paper, with phrases like beloved wife and taken too soon. Her picture was the same one she used on Facebook, glowing, styled, airbrushed to perfection. But beneath the surface, there were comments, dozens, some from old friends, some from strangers, and a few that pierced me. She always knew how to get what she wanted. I wish I'd known what she was hiding. She took something from someone I care about, and I hope she made it right. I closed the laptop, slowly, and whispered, not bitterly but like a mantra, "She's not the main character anymore." A week later, during a walk near the river, Nor asked if I had ever painted myself. I laughed. "Self-portraits aren't really my thing." "That's why you need to do one," she said. "You've painted what you lost. Now paint who's left." I didn't answer, but I thought about it all night. And the next morning, I started. It was slow. I didn't want to paint what I looked like. I wanted to paint what it felt like to survive, to carry your own name again after someone wore it like a borrowed coat. So I painted a figure in pieces, not broken, in motion. A woman walking forward, her shadow behind her split in two, one side a silhouette of her sister, the other a younger version of herself. And in her hands, a canvas, blank, open, unburdened. On the last day of the residency, each artist was invited to share one piece and speak about it. I chose the self-portrait. I stood beside it in the gallery room, hands folded, voice steady. This is called inheritance, not the kind you get in a will, the kind you give yourself when you stop letting other people write your story. There was silence, and then applause. Not loud, not showy, just affirming. After the exhibit, a woman I hadn't met before approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "You're Clara Harper's sister, aren't you?" I froze. She saw it. "Sorry, I should have said. I used to know her. Briefly. College. She told me once that you were the strong one. I didn't believe her then. And now I see you standing here." She nodded at the painting, and I believe her. That night, I sat by the window in my tiny studio, journal in my lap. I wrote. I no longer live in her shadow. I no longer edit myself for anyone's comfort. I no longer apologize for outlasting the people who underestimated me. This life is mine, and no one is taking it again. The first time I walked back into my apartment after the residency, I didn't recognize the woman who had lived there. Her shoes were still by the door, flats, scuffed, and practical, the kind you wear to blend in. Her coffee mugs, stacked in muted beige tones, whispered of a life lived politely. Even the throw blanket on the couch looked small. It was strange. I hadn't moved out, but somehow The version of me who had packed for the artist's retreat was not the one unpacking now. I walked room to room like I was visiting someone else's house. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was liberation. Because for the first time, I could see the spaces I'd made myself small in. And I wasn't going to shrink anymore. I started by clearing the shelves. Not wildly, not angrily. I just picked things up and asked myself, does this belong to the Meredith I am now? The framed picture of Clara and me at ages 12 and 9, gone. The vase Owen gave me on our second anniversary, still chipped at the base, gone. Books I'd kept to look smart, clothes I wore to avoid comment, the silk scarf I never liked but wore to family events because Mom had picked it, all gone. In their place, paint brushes, photos I took myself, a new canvas leaning against the wall, blank and full of promise. A week later, I hosted Julia for dinner. She brought red wine and a box of pastries that looked far too delicate to eat without a celebration. We sat on the floor, plates in our laps, and music playing softly in the background. This place feels different, she said. It is. You feel different. I smiled. I am. We talked about everything. The residency, the self-portrait, the way grief has a half-life, how it doesn't disappear, it just rearranges. Do you think Clara would have liked the painting? I asked. Does it matter? She said, sipping her wine. I paused. No, I guess it doesn't. And I meant it. After she left, I opened the small box Clara's nurse had mailed me weeks ago. I had almost forgotten about it. A final artifact from her bedroom, apparently. Inside, beneath tissue paper, was a photo album. Clara's, not the public one she posted for likes. This one was older, worn, with captions in pen and pages that had clearly been flipped through hundreds of times. She had marked a page. I turned to it. It was a photo of me. Just me, no one else. I was maybe 15, sitting cross-legged in the backyard, hands covered in paint, laughing at something off camera. The sunlight caught the side of my face, and my hair was wild from the wind. Beneath it, she had written, Meredith, before the world got loud. And below that, you were always the original. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive her either, but I did close the album slowly and whisper, you saw me after all, even if it was too late to tell me. I kept the photo, framed it, placed it above my writing desk. A reminder, not of Clara, of me, the me who laughed without apology, created without fear, lived without asking for permission. A few days later, I signed a lease for a studio space. Nothing fancy, high ceilings, cracked brick, and enough light to see my colors clearly. I put my name on the window, just mine. No sister's shadow, no shared past, just Meredith Harper's studio. That night, I wrote the final entry in the journal I started at the residency. Some stories don't get a tidy ending. Some sisters don't get redeemed. Some truths don't heal. They just land hard and necessary, like rain after a drought. But I know who I am now. Not in relation to her. Not in reaction to him. Just me. And if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I submitted my first gallery application. I didn't make an announcement. Didn't post anything online. No confetti. No validation seeking. I just clicked submit, then sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. Because this time, the thing I'd created didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be mine. It had taken me over 4 decades to realize. I never had to earn my place in the world. I just had to stop asking permission to take it. The gallery's theme was what we carry. And for my submission, I included 3 paintings. One titled Inheritance, the self-portrait with the fractured shadows. One called Unsent Letter, an abstract canvas layered in dark blues and charcoal grays, the texture thick enough to feel like a secret. And one I finished just 2 weeks ago, titled simply Quiet Return. That one showed a house in the distance, my childhood home, and a figure walking away from it, toward the viewer. You couldn't see her face, just her posture, upright, resolved, free. The gallery curator emailed me back 5 days later. Short, professional, beautifully dull. Ms. Harper, thank you for your submission. We are pleased to inform you that your work has been accepted for exhibition in our upcoming showcase. We especially appreciated the emotional clarity and restraint in Quiet Return. Looking forward to working with you. Sincerely, Corinne Alvarez, curator. I stared at the email, read it twice, then whispered to myself, there's no one else in this sentence. No Clara, no Owen, just me. I didn't call anyone. I didn't need anyone to clap for me. I just sat with it, that strange, trembling quiet that comes with realizing the mountain you've been climbing is behind you now. Weeks later, on the night of the gallery opening, I wore a deep green dress. Simple, elegant, nothing like the muted tones I used to favor. It wasn't loud, but it was present. When I arrived, the space was humming, softly lit, wine glasses clinking, the buzz of people discussing meaning and brushstrokes, and the emotional undercurrent of form. I stood near my pieces, not as their creator waiting for praise, but as a woman who had arrived fully and unapologetically in her own name. A few people came by to ask about my work. Some didn't recognize me as the artist at all. And one woman, older, sharp-eyed, lingered longer than most in front of Quiet Return. This one feels like an ending, she said. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe it's just the first step of a new beginning. She smiled. You speak like someone who's buried things and grown something from it. That's exactly what I did. As the night wound down, I slipped into the back of the gallery and stepped out into the alley behind it. The air was cool. Still, I looked up at the sky, no longer searching for signs. I didn't need to make sense of things anymore. Some questions would never be answered. Some apologies would never come. But I had survived without them. And more than that, I had thrived. I reached into my purse and pulled out something I hadn't looked at in months. The last note Clara ever wrote me. I unfolded it slowly, then set it on the ground and let the wind take it. Not out of anger, but as a final act of detachment. Clara would always be part of my story, but she would never again be the narrator. A week later, I signed a contract with a local publisher. They wanted a collection of essays, reflections on identity, loss, recovery. I asked if I could illustrate the cover myself. They said yes. And when they asked what I wanted to title it, I didn't hesitate. The signature is mine. The morning the first proof copy arrived, I held it for a long time, ran my fingers over the embossed title, looked at the artwork, my own, and smiled. Not the polite, performative smile I used to practice in mirrors, but the real one, the one I thought I'd lost somewhere between being a daughter, a sister, a lover, a caretaker. I wasn't any of those things anymore. I was Meredith Harper, artist, author, woman reclaimed. That afternoon, I painted the final canvas for the exhibition's closing night. A single chair, centered, sturdy, unoccupied. It was titled, Room for Me,